The valley was supposed to be empty. That's what the briefing said. That's what the satellite imagery confirmed. That's what everyone believed until the radio crackled with a voice that shouldn't have been there, calm, almost bored, like someone ordering coffee instead of reporting contact with an enemy force that wasn't supposed to exist. The SEALs pinned down in the Korangal had 3 minutes before the Taliban mortar teams found their range. 3 minutes before the mountainside became their grave. And in those 3 minutes, every available asset in theater said the same thing: impossible. The terrain was too tight, the weather too volatile, the ceiling too low. No fixed-wing aircraft could operate in that canyon. It was gunships or nothing, and the gunships were 20 minutes out. 20 minutes they didn't have. Lieutenant Commander Marcus Hale stood in the operations center at Bagram, watching the drone feed with the kind of stillness that comes before bad news. The SEAL team leader's voice came through again, clipped and professional, but there was something underneath it now, something that sounded like goodbye. Hale reached for the radio to tell them to dig in, to hold, to pray. But before his hand touched the transmitter, another voice cut through the channel. Female. Unfamiliar. Call sign Reaper 7. She wasn't asking for permission. She was already inbound. The operations center went quiet. Someone pulled up her flight profile. Thunderbolt II, the Warthog, a plane built for close air support but not for threading needles through mountain passes in zero visibility. The air boss shook his head. Tell her to break off. She'll auger in before she gets eyes on target. Hale hesitated. He'd been in theater for 9 months and had never heard that call sign. He pulled up her service record on the secondary monitor. Captain Ren Calloway. 2 deployments. 1,500 hours. Decorated. Reassigned from fighters to the Hog after some incident that wasn't detailed in the file. The kind of reassignment that usually meant someone pissed off the wrong person or couldn't cut it anymore. The drone feed showed nothing but clouds and rock. The SEALs had gone silent. The mortar impacts were walking closer. Hale made a decision that felt like surrender. Reaper 7, you are cleared hot. God help you. Her response was immediate. God doesn't fly this low tower, I do. Then the radio went quiet, and the only sound in the operations center was the hum of computers and the distant thunder that might have been weather or might have been something else entirely. The A-10 dropped below the cloud bank like a predator emerging from smoke. Most pilots would have pulled up the moment they saw the terrain, jagged ridges rising on 3 sides, the valley floor barely wider than a football field, wind shear that could flip an aircraft inverted before the pilot even registered the turbulence. Ren Calloway flew lower. The Warthog's shadow raced across the scree slopes, so close that Taliban fighters looked up thinking it was a vehicle on the mountainside. She banked hard right, the wingtip clearing a rock outcropping by less than 10 feet, her airspeed dancing at the edge of stall as she bled off velocity to stay in the kill box. The SEALs heard her before they saw her, the distinctive whine of the twin turbofan engines, a sound like ripping fabric that meant salvation or annihilation depending on which side of the gun you stood. In the operations center, someone whispered, "She's going to die." Hale didn't respond. He was watching the altimeter data streaming from her aircraft. 200 feet, 150, numbers that made his stomach clench. The drone feed showed her from above, the gray-green camouflage of the A-10 stark against the brown earth, moving with a precision that seemed impossible given the speed and the terrain. She wasn't just flying low, she was hunting. The Taliban mortar teams never saw her coming. They were focused on the SEALs, calculating trajectories, adjusting elevation. The first burst from the GAU-8 Avenger cannon sounded like the sky tearing itself apart. 30-millimeter rounds, each one the size of a milk bottle, chewed through rock and flesh and metal at a rate of 65 per second. The mortar position disappeared in a cloud of dust and fire. Ren rolled the aircraft left, lining up on the secondary position before the Taliban fighters could even process what was happening. The cannon roared again. Shorter burst this time, more controlled. The second position ceased to exist. She pulled up and away, climbing hard, the Warthog's engine screaming as she gained altitude. The SEALs lay flat in their fighting positions, ears ringing, covered in debris that had been lethal a moment before. The team leader keyed his radio. "Reaper 7, this is Dagger 1. You just saved 6 lives. How copy?" Ren's voice came back steady, almost detached. "Copy Dagger 1, stay low, I'm making another pass." In the operations center, the air boss turned to Hale. "Who the hell is she?" Hale was reading the file again, looking for answers that weren't there. Someone they forgot to keep. The second pass was slower, more methodical. Ren brought the A-10 around in a wide arc, using the terrain to mask her approach, then dropped back into the valley from a different angle. The Taliban fighters who survived the first attack were scattering, running for caves and crevices, anything that might offer protection from the monster circling above. She didn't chase them. Instead, she put herself between the SEALs and the high ground, orbiting in a pattern that turned the warthog into a flying fortress. Every few seconds, she'd fire a burst into suspected fighting positions, not because she saw targets but because she was denying space, making it impossible for the enemy to maneuver. It was textbook close air support, executed in conditions that weren't supposed to allow for textbook anything. The gunships arrived 18 minutes later. By then, the valley was quiet. The SEALs were already moving to extract, double timing it down the ridge toward the landing zone. Ren stayed overhead until they were airborne, until the Black Hawks were clear of the mountain range, until there was nothing left to protect. Only then did she break off and head back to base. She landed 40 minutes later, settling onto the runway at Bagram with the kind of gentle touchdown that contradicted everything she'd just done. The ground crew swarmed the aircraft immediately, inspecting it for damage. They found scratches along the underside where she'd come so close to the rocks that paint had been scraped away. One of the crew chiefs shook his head in disbelief. Another made the sign of the cross. Ren climbed out of the cockpit, pulled off her helmet, and walked toward the debriefing room without looking back. Lieutenant Commander Hale was waiting for her outside operations. He'd watched the entire engagement from multiple angles, seen things that he'd tell other pilots about in bars for years to come, knowing they wouldn't quite believe him. "Captain Calloway," he said as she approached, "that was the most reckless display of airmanship I've ever witnessed." Ren stopped, met his eyes. She was shorter than he expected, maybe 5'5", with dark hair pulled back in a regulation bun and a face that gave away nothing. "Is that a compliment or a reprimand, sir?" Hale almost smiled. "Both. The SEALs want to buy you a drink. Half the operations staff wants to court-martial you. I'm still deciding which side I'm on." She nodded slowly. "Let me know when you figure it out." Then she walked past him into the debriefing room, leaving Hale standing in the afternoon heat, wondering what exactly had just happened and why her personnel file was so carefully sanitized. The debrief lasted an hour. Intelligence officers asked questions about enemy positions, weapons systems, casualties. Ren answered each one precisely, without elaboration, using the kind of neutral military language that communicated facts without feelings. She sketched the valley from memory, marking coordinates, nodding terrain features. When they asked how she'd identified the secondary mortar position without visual confirmation, she explained the logic of placement, fields of fire, likely avenues of approach. It was a masterclass in tactical analysis delivered in a monotone that suggested she'd rather be anywhere else. When they finished, the senior intelligence officer, a major named Kessler with 20 years in and eyes that had seen too many operations go wrong, leaned back in his chair and studied her. "You've done this before," he said. "It wasn't a question." "Done what, sir?" "Flown like you're trying to prove something." Ren's expression didn't change. "I flew the mission, that's all." Kessler held her gaze for a moment, then nodded. "Dismissed, Captain." She stood, saluted, and left. As the door closed behind her, Kessler turned to the other officers in the room. "Pull her full record, not the sanitized version. I want to know what we're dealing with." Lieutenant Commander Hale, who'd been sitting quietly in the corner, spoke up. "With respect, sir, does it matter? She saved 6 operators today. That's what we're dealing with." Kessler looked at him. "Everyone who flies like that is either running towards something or away from it. I need to know which." Outside, Wren walked across the airfield toward the transient quarters. The sun was setting, painting the Hindu Kush in shades of purple and gold. Other pilots were heading to the chow hall, laughing, talking, decompressing. She went the other direction, toward solitude, toward the small room with the narrow bed where she could be alone with the silence. Someone called her name. She didn't turn around. Back in operations, Kessler's request worked its way through channels. The full file arrived 2 hours later, marked classified, need to know only. Hale read it in a secure room with the door locked. When he finished, he sat back and stared at the wall for a long time. Then he went looking for Wren Calloway, because suddenly everything made sense and nothing made sense, and he needed to hear it from her. He found her in the gym at midnight, alone, running on a treadmill like she was trying to outpace something invisible. He waited until she finished, until she grabbed a towel and saw him standing by the door. "We need to talk," Hale said. Wren wiped her face. "No, sir, we don't." Kandahar 3 years ago, the friendly fire incident. She went very still. For a moment Hale thought she might walk away, but then she nodded once, sharp and final. "What about it?" Hale chose his words carefully. "The report said pilot error, command failure. You were flying Overwatch when the Marine convoy got hit. You dropped ordnance on coordinates you thought were enemy positions. They weren't. 4 Marines died." "I'm aware," Wren said quietly. "The file says you were cleared of wrongdoing, that the coordinates came from a JTAC who misidentified the target, but they reassigned you anyway, took you off multi-role fighters and put you in the Hog, a demotion in everything but name." Wren slung the towel around her neck. "Is there a question in there, Commander?" Hale stepped closer. "The SEAL team leader from today sent a message. He said to tell you that Daggerfor, one of the men you saved, was at Kandahar that day. He was in that convoy. He lost his best friend in the strike, and today you saved his life." Wren closed her eyes. Hale watched something move across her face, some emotion she couldn't quite suppress. "He wants to meet you," Hale continued. "He wants to say thank you." When Wren opened her eyes again, they were dry and hard. "Tell him I'm glad he's alive. Tell him I'm sorry about his friend. And tell him I don't do reunions." She walked past Hale, out of the gym into the darkness. The next morning, Wren was scheduled for a routine patrol. Nothing dangerous, just presence, showing the flag, keeping the enemy honest. She pre-flighted the A-10 in silence while her crew chief, a staff sergeant named DeMarco who'd been turning wrenches since the Gulf War, watched from the shade of a hangar. He'd worked on Wren's aircraft for 6 weeks now and had never heard her make small talk. She checked systems, walked the airframe, ran through procedures with mechanical efficiency. Most pilots joked with their crew, bitched about maintenance, talked about home. Wren just flew. DeMarco finally spoke up. "Word around the base is you did something crazy yesterday." Wren glanced at him. "Word travels fast. SEALs don't shut up when someone saves their bacon. They're calling you the ghost of Quarangle." He paused. "Some of the other pilots are calling you something else." "I can imagine. They're saying you're reckless, that you're going to get yourself killed trying to be a hero." Wren returned to her pre-flight inspection. "I'm not trying to be anything, Sergeant. I'm just doing my job." DeMarco walked over, stood next to her. "I pulled maintenance records on every Hog in theater. You know how many times your bird's been hit compared to the others? 0. You know how many emergency landings you've made? 0. For someone who supposedly flies reckless, your aircraft always comes back clean. That tells me you're not crazy. You're just better than everyone else and they can't handle it." Wren looked at him for a moment. It was the longest conversation they'd ever had. "The aircraft comes back clean because I don't take unnecessary risks," she said. "I take necessary ones. There's a difference. And yesterday was necessary. 6 men were going to die, so yes. DeMarco nodded slowly. For what it's worth, Captain, I'd fly with you any day. It was a small thing, maybe meaningless, but Wren felt something shift, some weight she'd been carrying since Kandahar lightened just slightly. Thanks, Sergeant. Keep her ready. Something tells me this won't be the last time. She climbed into the cockpit, strapped in, and ran through startup. The engines spooled up with their characteristic whine, and minutes later she was airborne, climbing into a sky that looked peaceful but never was. The patrol lasted 4 hours. Wren flew lazy circles over the Tangi Valley, coordinating with ground units, checking in with forward operating bases, maintaining situational awareness. It was the kind of mission that could lull you into complacency if you weren't careful. She stayed sharp, scanning the terrain, monitoring radio traffic, ready for anything. Nothing happened. Sometimes nothing happening was the best outcome. On the way back to Bagram, she flew over the Korangal Valley. She didn't plan to. The navigation system suggested a more direct route, but she adjusted course slightly, descended 1,000 feet, and made a single pass over the area where the SEALs had been pinned down the day before. The mortar positions were scorched craters now. The rocks were pockmarked with 30-millimeter impacts. From altitude, it looked like the earth had been torn open and sutured closed. Wren keyed her radio. Bagram Tower, Reaper 7. Request permission to break formation and make a low pass over previous engagement area. The tower responded immediately. Reaper 7, negative. Maintain assigned altitude and heading. Return to base. She didn't argue. She brought the A-10 around and headed home. But as she cleared the valley, she looked back one more time at the mountains that had almost become a tomb for 6 men who were now drinking coffee somewhere, telling stories, alive because she'd done what everyone said couldn't be done. Back at Bagram, Hale was in his office when the knock came. He looked up to see Dagger One standing in the doorway, still in his combat uniform, dusty and tired but alive. The SEAL was tall, maybe 6'2", with the kind of weathered face that came from too many deployments. His name tape read Carrigan. Commander Hale, got a minute? Hale gestured to a chair. Master Chief, what can I do for you? Carrigan sat down but looked like he'd rather be standing. SEALs weren't comfortable in offices. I wanted to talk about Captain Calloway, the pilot from yesterday. What about her? My guys are putting together a commendation package. Navy Cross, maybe Medal of Honor. What she did yesterday, there's no category for it. We were dead. She brought us back. Hale nodded. I'll support whatever you put forward. She earned it. Carrigan leaned forward. There's something else. One of my men, Dagger 4, his name's Morales, he was at Kandahar 3 years back, the incident with the convoy. He lost his team leader that day. Guy named Hutchins, best Marine he ever knew. Hale felt his chest tighten, and yesterday when we were trapped, when those mortars were walking in, Morales told me he was making peace with it. He said maybe this was how it balanced out, that he survived Kandahar so he could die here. Then your pilot showed up. Carrigan paused. He doesn't think it's a coincidence. He thinks she's been carrying Kandahar around ever since. He thinks yesterday was her way of trying to make it right. Did you tell him she declined to meet? Yeah, he figured she would. That's why he wrote her a letter. Carrigan pulled an envelope from his pocket, set it on the desk. Would you make sure she gets this? Not ordering you, just asking. Hale picked up the envelope. It was sealed, Wren's name written in careful block letters on the front. I'll get it to her, he said. Carrigan stood. Appreciate it, Commander, and tell her something for me. Tell her Hutchins would have wanted her to forgive herself, because the rest of us already have. Then he was gone, and Hale was left holding a letter that weighed more than paper should. He found Wren in the chow hall that evening, sitting alone at a corner table, eating mechanically, not tasting the food. He sat down across from her without asking permission. Master Chief Carrigan stopped by today, he said. Wren didn't look up, and Hale slid the envelope across the table. He wanted you to have this. She stared at it like it was a live grenade. I told you I don't. I know what you told me, but you're going to read it anyway, because you owe it to those men, both the ones you saved and the ones you couldn't. Wren's jaw tightened. For a moment, Hale thought she might just walk away, but then she picked up the envelope, stood, and left the chow hall without another word. He didn't follow. Some things you had to face alone. Wren went back to her quarters, closed the door, and sat on the edge of the narrow bed. She held the envelope for a long time, feeling its weight, its texture. Finally, she opened it. The letter was handwritten, 2 pages, the penmanship precise despite being done in the field. Captain Calloway, you don't know me, but 3 years ago you changed my life. My name is Raphael Morales. I was a lance corporal in the Marines serving in a convoy near Kandahar. My team leader was Staff Sergeant David Hutchins. He was the best man I ever knew. When the Taliban ambushed us, Hutch got me and 2 others to cover. He was calling in air support when your ordnance hit. The coordinates were wrong. You know this. I know this. Hutch died instantly. The investigation cleared you, but I hated you anyway. I hated you for being alive when he was dead. I hated you for the mistake that cost him his life. I'm writing this letter because yesterday you saved my life. I was in that valley, pinned down out of options. When I heard your call sign, I didn't know it was you. But when you made that first pass, when you flew so low I could see the panel lines on your aircraft, I knew whoever was flying had to be either insane or the best pilot I'd ever seen. Later, when I found out it was you, I didn't know what to feel. Here's what I know now. Hutch would have forgiven you the moment it happened. He was that kind of man. He would have understood that war is chaos, that mistakes happen, that you carry a burden heavier than any medal or commendation. And he would have been proud that you saved 6 operators yesterday. He would have bought you a beer and told you to keep flying. I can't bring him back. You can't undo Kandahar, but I can tell you that you saved my life, and that means something. It means you're still fighting, still trying, still willing to put yourself between danger and the people who need you. That's what Hutch did every day. I think you understand him better than most. Thank you for yesterday. And if you're carrying guilt about Kandahar, I'm asking you to put some of it down. Not all of it. I'm not saying forget, but maybe forgive yourself enough to keep going. Because pilots like you are the reason men like me get to go home. Respectfully, Raphael Morales, SEAL Team 3. Wren read the letter 3 times. Then she folded it carefully, placed it in her jacket pocket, and sat in the darkness of her quarters, staring at nothing, feeling something she hadn't allowed herself to feel in 3 years, the faintest possibility of redemption. The next morning she flew again, and the morning after that, each mission precise, professional, deadly when necessary. Other pilots started watching her more closely, trying to understand how she did what she did. Some asked for advice. She gave it sparingly, in technical terms, nothing personal. But slowly, grudgingly, they began to respect her, not because she was friendly or charismatic, but because she was undeniably good at keeping people alive. Word spread beyond Bagram. Other units started requesting her by name for close air support missions. The operations staff initially resisted. She was just one pilot, they couldn't dedicate her to specific teams, but the requests kept coming. A Marine rifle company in Helmand, an Army Ranger platoon in Ghazni, even a Delta Force element operating near the Pakistan border. They all wanted Reaper 7. They all wanted the pilot who flew like death itself and brought everyone home. Major Kessler called her into his office on a Tuesday morning. She reported precisely on time, stood at attention, waited. He gestured for her to sit. She remained standing. At ease, Captain. This isn't that kind of meeting. She sat barely. Kessler pulled up a file on his computer. You've flown 17 combat missions in the last 2 weeks. That's more than any other pilot in theater. You're averaging 10 hours a day in the cockpit. The flight surgeons are starting to worry about fatigue. I'm fine, sir. I'm sure you are, But the question I have is why? You're not assigned to a specific unit. You don't have a quota to meet. So why are you flying every mission you can get your hands on? Ren met his eyes. Because they keep asking for me, sir, and I keep saying yes. That's not an answer. It's the only one I have. Kessler studied her. The SEAL team put you in for a Navy Cross. Did you know that? I heard. You don't sound excited. I'm not flying for medals, sir. Then why are you flying? Ren was quiet for a moment. Then she said something she hadn't planned to say, something that came from a place she usually kept locked away. Because the alternative is not flying. And if I'm not flying, I'm thinking. And if I'm thinking, I'm remembering. And I'd rather be up there doing something useful than down here doing nothing. Kessler nodded slowly. That's the most honest thing anyone said to me in 6 months. All right, Captain, keep flying. But you take a day off every week whether you like it or not. That's an order. Yes, sir. Dismissed. She stood, saluted, left. As the door closed, Kessler made a note in her file, not about fatigue or flight hours, just 2 words: keep watching. The day off came on a Thursday. Ren spent it the way she spent all forced downtime, running, lifting weights, sitting in her quarters reading tactical manuals. She avoided the other pilots, avoided the social areas, avoided anything that required small talk or vulnerability. Around 1400 hours, someone knocked on her door. She considered ignoring it. The knock came again, patient and persistent. She opened the door to find Sergeant DeMarco standing there with a tablet in his hand. Sorry to bother you, Captain, but I thought you'd want to see this. He handed her the tablet. On the screen was a maintenance report. Her A-10 had just completed its scheduled inspection. Everything checked out perfectly. But at the bottom in the notes section, DeMarco had written something unusual. Aircraft shows signs of consistent exceptional handling. No stress fractures, no abnormal wear patterns, no indications of aggressive flight profile despite mission reports indicating extreme low-level operations. Recommend pilot, receive commendation for airmanship and aircraft preservation. Ren read it twice. You didn't have to do this. DeMarco shrugged. I write what I see. That bird should be falling apart given what you put it through, but it's not. That means you're not just good, you're taking care of her. Not enough pilots do that. He took the tablet back. Anyway, thought you should know. Some of us appreciate what you do. He left before she could respond. Ren stood in the doorway for a minute, then went back inside. She thought about the letter from Morales, about Hale's words, about DeMarco's quiet acknowledgement. Small things. But small things were how you built a foundation when everything else had crumbled. That night, for the first time since Kandahar, Ren slept without nightmares. The operation came down 3 days later. A high-value target deep in Taliban territory, a compound fortified with multiple fighting positions, a target window of less than 5 minutes before reinforcements arrived. Special operations wanted 2 A-10s for close air support, maximum firepower, surgical precision. The mission brief was classified, need to know only. Ren and another pilot, a captain named Tors, solid and experienced, were tapped for the mission. They met in the briefing room at 0:30. Intelligence officers laid out the target, approach vectors, expected enemy strength. The compound sat in a valley ringed by peaks, natural choke points on all sides. The special operations team would infill by helicopter, fast rope onto the compound, complete their objective, and exfil within 6 minutes. The A-10s would provide overwatch and engage any enemy reinforcements attempting to intervene. Tor studied the map. That valley looks familiar. Isn't that near where the Korangal incident happened? The intelligence officer nodded. Same general area, different valley but similar terrain. Tors glanced at Ren. You've flown there before. It wasn't a question. Everyone knew by now. Ren nodded once. I'm familiar with the terrain. Then you take lead, I'll fly wing. The briefing continued. Weapons loadout, communications protocols, contingencies. When it ended, Tors caught up with Ren in the hallway outside. "Hey, I know what people say about you. About Kandahar, about how you fly. I want you to know I don't care about any of that. I care about bringing those operators home safe. You good with that?" Ren looked at him. Tors had 1,500 hours in the Hog, 3 deployments, a reputation for steady hands and sound judgment. He wasn't grandstanding. He was being honest. "I'm good with that," she said. They launched at 0400, 2 dark shapes lifting off into a darker sky. The flight to the target area took 40 minutes, cruising at altitude, maintaining radio silence. Below them, Afghanistan stretched out in shades of black and gray, a landscape that had swallowed armies for centuries. Ren flew with the kind of calm that came from complete focus. Tors held formation off her wing, professional and tight. At 0435, the Special Operations Team radioed their infill. "Reaper 7, Dagger 1, we're on the ground. 6 minutes to completion. Hold high and tight." Ren rogered and began a wide orbit 3,000 feet above the valley. From that altitude, she could see the entire area, the compound, the surrounding peaks, the roads leading in and out. Tors mirrored her orbit on the opposite side, creating a defensive perimeter. For the first 3 minutes, nothing happened. Then the radio crackled. "Reaper 7, Dagger 1, we have multiple enemy vehicles inbound from the north. 3 technicals, heavy weapons. ETA 2 minutes. Need immediate suppression." Ren didn't hesitate. "Copy, Dagger 1, going hot." She rolled inverted, pulled through, and dove toward the deck. Tors followed without question. The 2 A-10s dropped from 3,000 feet to 500 in seconds, the terrain rushing up to meet them. Ren leveled off and accelerated, eyes scanning the northern approach. She saw headlights first, then the vehicles themselves, pickup trucks with machine guns mounted in the beds, tearing down the dirt road toward the compound. "Reaper 8, take the lead vehicle. I'll take the trail." Tors acknowledged. They split, each lining up on their target. Ren jinked left to avoid a small ridge, dropped even lower, then squeezed the trigger. The GAU-8 roared. The trail vehicle disintegrated, tumbling off the road in a shower of sparks and debris. Tors engaged simultaneously. The lead vehicle exploded, blocking the road. The middle vehicle tried to turn around. Ren came around for another pass and erased it from existence. "Dagger 1, Reaper 7, road is clear. You have 4 minutes." "Copy, Reaper 7, good shooting." Ren pulled up and resumed orbit. Below, the Special Operations Team finished their mission, moved to the exfil point, loaded into helicopters, and lifted off. The whole operation lasted 5 minutes and 40 seconds. No friendly casualties. No enemy survivors. Textbook. On the flight back to Bagram, Tors came up on the radio. "Reaper 7, that was some of the best CAS I've ever seen. Thanks for the lead." Ren's response was simple: "Anytime, Reaper 8." But inside, she felt something shift again. Not redemption. That was still too big, too far away. But maybe the first step toward it. Maybe proof that she could still do this work, still protect people, still matter in a way that counted. They landed as the sun rose over the mountains, painting the sky in colors that promised another day of war and another chance to make a difference in it. The commendation ceremony happened 2 weeks later. Ren had tried to avoid it, but Major Kessler made it clear that attendance was not optional. The SEALs wanted to honor her publicly, and the command wanted to boost morale by showcasing success. So she put on her dress uniform, checked herself in the mirror with the kind of detachment usually reserved for weapons inspections, and walked to the ceremony feeling like she was heading to her own court-martial. The small parade ground at Bagram was crowded. SEALs, Marines, Army Rangers, Air Force personnel, all standing in formation under the brutal Afghan sun. Lieutenant Commander Hale stood at the podium. Master Chief Carrigan and his team were front and center. Ren stood off to the side, stiff and uncomfortable, wishing she could disappear. Hale began. We're here today to recognize exceptional bravery and airmanship under fire. 3 weeks ago, a SEAL team operating in the Korangal Valley found themselves in a situation with no good options. Enemy forces had them pinned, air support was minutes away, and the tactical situation was rapidly deteriorating. Then Captain Ren Calloway, call sign Reaper 7, made a decision that defied conventional wisdom and saved 6 lives. He went on to describe the mission in detail, the terrain, the conditions, the impossibility of what she'd accomplished. Ren stared at a point somewhere over the crowd's heads, her face a mask. When Hale finished, Carrigan stepped forward. "Captain Calloway," he said, "on behalf of SEAL Team 3 and every operator whose life you've protected, thank you. You embody everything we ask from our close air support: courage, skill, and the willingness to put yourself in harm's way for the mission. It's an honor to serve alongside you." He pinned the Navy Cross to her uniform. The crowd applauded. Cameras flashed. Ren saluted, shook hands, said the right words, but inside she felt hollow. The medal was heavy. The recognition felt like a spotlight illuminating everything she'd failed to be at Kandahar. After the ceremony, people approached her, congratulations, respect, requests for photos. She endured it with the same stoicism she brought to combat, but when Morales stepped forward, she tensed. He looked different in person than she'd imagined. Younger, more earnest. "Captain," he said quietly, "thank you for reading my letter, and thank you for everything." Ren managed a nod. "I'm glad you made it home, Morales." "Hutch would have liked you," he said. Then he stepped back into the crowd. The words stayed with her long after the ceremony ended, long after she'd changed back into her flight suit and returned to the work of flying. Hutch would have liked you. It was absolution she didn't deserve and forgiveness she hadn't asked for, but maybe it was enough to keep going. Maybe that was all anyone could hope for. Weeks turned into months. Ren flew more missions than any pilot in theater. She became a fixture in operations, a name requested by ground units from every branch. The A-10 with the distinctive tail number became famous among troops who knew what it meant when Reaper 7 was overhead. Some units started painting small scorpion symbols on their vehicles, an unofficial emblem of survival, because if you